Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, October 3rd, 2014. There's a new title you're seeing, the WNW160. I'm titling it that way because it's the weekly news wrap-up. It's the 160th one since I've been, on the air here on USA Watchdog. And then I put, some other things like Ebola threat and title it a little differently to give people a better description about what they're going to be saying. That said, with the new title business out of the way, let's get into the weekly news wrap-up. And we are headed towards wider war in the Middle East, as I have been forecasting. And titles like this earlier in the week, USA Today, Boehner, Airstrikes Not Enough. John Boehner, Speaker of the House, says, at some point somebody's boots have to be on the ground. And what he is intimating is that U.S. boots are going to have to be on the ground. Now, listen, they have gotten the coalition bigger. The U.K., Belgium, France are all involved in the coalition, but they don't want to bomb in Syria. No, not in Syria. They don't want to bomb in Syria because I think they don't want to make Russia angry. They don't want to piss them off. They still have to trade with them, and they don't even want to take the chance of an errant bomb, or them being accused of bombing Assad's regime. They'll bomb in Iraq, not in Syria. Now, Turkey has also come on board. They're a NATO country. They're just north of Syria. And listen, this thing is shaping up to be ugly. They are going to bomb in Syria, as is Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They're going to bomb ISIS, ISIL, the Islamic State, the Caliphate, all these names. I like just calling them ISIS. But, people ignore the fact that our allies, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, armed ISIS, along with the U.S. I've been complaining about this for a year and a half, 2 years, saying, hey, we're arming the rebels, and there's a big part of them that's Al-Qaeda, and part of these rebels broke off and became ISIS. And nobody even brings up the fact that the U.S. armed these people and allowed them to pump oil at, $2-3 million a day for months and take over half the country. And now, they're a big threat. I don't understand the foreign policy. It is a enormous mess. I mean, here we are going after Assad in Syria, and Iran and Russia are backing them. And now we're going after ISIS in eastern Syria and western Iraq, and now we're kind of wanting Iran to help us. We're also trying to do nuclear talks, to curtail their nuclear program, which I do not think is going to happen. And then you have, the wild cards in the Middle East, and the one-eyed jacks that are flopping out everywhere, potential ones in the future. Israel standing up in front of the United Nations saying Iran is the biggest threat, not ISIS or ISIL in the Middle East. And to me, I don't see how that this doesn't turn into a much wider war, global war, World War III, call it what you want. But once ISIS is gone, what then? We're going to go, everything's okay, all's forgiven. We're not going to try to kick Assad out and not try to put a pipeline through Syria for Saudi Arabia and for Qatar. How's that going to work out? And I think at the very least, a lot of people think this is done on purpose, that they created ISIS, and they probably did to try to go after Assad, but they went the wrong way and it backfired. At the very least, the U.S. helped arm these guys, and at the very least, this is a policy that has backfired. And it's not just Iraq and Syria. It's really much wider. And I give the USA Today a hard time sometimes. I call them Tiger Beat and give them a hard time lying by omission. And I have another story here I want to bring up about them. But here's a story that they did that was really good this week. And Islamic State's sprawling influence. The Islamic State's sprawling influence. So we've created somebody, the U.S., Qatar, Saudi Arabia, whoever, has created a bit of a monster because this is spreading all over the globe. This idea that, some of these nasty beheadings are because of payback from nasty things done to Muslims, and that the Islamic State is gaining power because, hey, look, America is attacking us and trying to bomb us. They're chiding us because of this air campaign. And I think boots will ultimately be on the ground. We're going to get in deep again in this situation, and it's going to be more messed up and screwed up than ever. It's not going to be just one country. It's going to be multiple countries. And we are going to be at a war with at least a component of radical Islam, and it's all over the globe. It's in Pakistan. There are reports of it popping up in India, of the Islamic State fighters, also in Australia, here in the U.S. I mean, this beheading, in Oklahoma, where, they don't want to call it, terrorism. They want to call it workplace violence. So far, they haven't called it anything yet. But, the Fort Hood shootings, that's more of that, where the guy's shooting people, killing 13 or 14 people, screaming out Allah Akbar, but they don't want to call it what it is, and that's, Islamic terrorism, radical Islam. And most of Islam is not radical. But we can't even define our enemy. But this was a good story, talking about how their influence around the globe is spreading, which, at the very least, this is a huge backfire in U.S. Policy, along with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And I want to continue on here with the financial war that's going on, that has been preceding what I think will be a global war or World War III, and I don't see how it gets worse before it gets better. I mean, let's say we knock out ISIL or ISIS. What then? We're just going to let Assad go and everything's fine, all is forgiven? And what happens if we end up, when we get done with ISIS, we start bombing Syria, and Russia gets involved in their missile batteries and their jet fighters and their navy in the Eastern Mediterranean? Well, so we have a global war with Russia, and then their ally China chimes in, and then where they can start selling our bonds. I mean, this is a mess. Just a mess. I don't even understand who invented this policy. But it's a chaotic mess. And I know through chaos comes order, but a lot of things can go wrong with this. A lot of things can go wrong with this, and are going wrong, I think, in my estimation. Well, financial war has been going on for some time, as I've been telling you, and it's not abating. I mean, how about these cheap oil prices? You'd think the oil price would be going up with all this violence. But no, part of this is overproduction. Part of this is people are driving less. You have 92 million or more people out of the workforce, so they're not driving. You have, oversupply and soft demand. That's part of that. But the other part of it is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is pumping oil like crazy. Normally they would cut back on production and firm up prices, but nope. They are pumping oil. Why? Because they, I think, are trying to punish Russia. And that's Russia's major export, oil, natural gas, particularly oil and natural gas, major energy exporter, and they want to hurt Russia. There's talk of oil going down to $60 a barrel. Now, is this some kind of a quid pro quo with, President Obama? And okay, well, I'll bomb them, but you got to pump oil like crazy and make me look good going into the midterms and all my, Democratic buddies. And, the Democrats are loving this. The economy's going to, firm up. It's going to look pretty good. I mean, at least at the gasoline pump, all of a sudden you're giving people more money to spend. Basically, if gasoline goes down below $3 a gallon, it might go to $2.50 a gallon. Who knows? I don't think that'll be a long-term trend. I mean, war and destroying infrastructure, oil infrastructure is going to be destroyed in the Middle East in this coming war, so, prices will vault back up. But for now, the trend is down for oil and gasoline prices around the world, particularly in the U.S., but the Saudis are willing to take the hit and, pump the oil and hurt Russia. And meanwhile, Russia's shaking all this off. They're like, okay, we have 8% inflation, and, we've got, the record low ruble prices. You guys are coming after us. But, hey, Russia does hold a big trump card, especially over Europe, and that's natural gas. And as winter gets closer and gets colder, things are going to get worse. The economy is not doing well. It's not doing well at all. And I don't think 8% inflation and record low ruble is going to be the thing that, knocks Russia out of the box. I mean, you got to remember, this is a country that Hitler invaded and killed 27 million people and lost. These people are tough. This ain't going to do it. Russia has more nuclear weapons than the United States. I'm not trying to carry Putin's water, but this is a real adversary, and I am worried about a wider war involving Russia and their ally, China. On a variety of fronts, I'm worried about that, and that could happen. And financial war, as I've been telling you, always precedes, real war, and we're getting both at the same time, and the real war is ramping up, and the financial war is in full bloom. That's for sure. Speaking of the economy, it is not looking good, at least to the IMF managing director, Christine Lagarde. I can't believe she was talking out of both sides of her mouth about the economy and political risk, and, the risks are abating, but, the struggles are getting worse, something like that. What? And she is quite worried about how the market is going up, but the real economy is going down. She's quite worried about how the real economy is doing relative to the markets, which is this pumped up money printing 0% interest rate environment where Wall Street goes up and gorges and pigs out at the public trough while the rest of the public suffers. Ben Bernanke recently came out, former Fed head, said the same thing, that, basically Main Street's not believing that we really have a recovery. Yeah, because we don't. I've been telling you this since I've been on, that we don't have it. They keep telling us we have a recovery, and we don't. And you wouldn't have Christine Lagarde at the IMF saying that she's quite worried if we had a recovery. They'd be raising interest rates. They would stop the money printing. And that's what Mario Draghi at the ECB, the head of the European Central Bank, how he wants to print euros and buy bonds of failing banks. Buy bonds so he could prop up the economy and get people working and help the economy. And, Germany wants to block that. They want to go to court and say, whoa, wait a minute, Mario, no, you can't do that. We have a treaty, and the treaty says we cannot monetize debt and destroy the currency. We did that. We tried that. It killed our currency, and it produced Hitler. That's what the Germans are saying. So we'll see how desperate things get. But if the economy was so good in Europe, and listen, these sanctions on Russia and Russia's counter-sanctions jacking up natural gas prices and cutting supply, this is death to a very fragile European economy. Much of the southern European economy is in depression. And even Germany has had 5 months or so of declining economic activity. Even Germany is falling out of bed. And Russia, Putin says that these sanctions are silly. And maybe in today's environment, you're starting a war in a really weak economy, a trade war, a financial war, which, could turn into a real war at some point. Gregory Mannarino says that, our 6.4% revised, or 4.6% rather, revised GDP number is smoke and mirrors. It's just the war spending being added to the GDP. Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, yesterday said, the U.S. is one of the bright spots. And really? Gregory Mannarino at TradersChoice.net, I was on the phone with him, earlier, and he says that, listen, we had just recently had bad housing numbers, we had bad manufacturing numbers, we had bad, consumer confidence numbers, we have a labor participation rate at 3-decade lows. He said, he says the world economy is on life support, and they cannot tell you the truth. Why? Because here's the truth. Of all the people I talk to, the consensus is we are going to have another crash. It's not a matter of if. It is a matter of when. Will it be deflationary, inflationary, inflation and deflation at the same time? Who knows? But of all the people I talk to, even most recently, for example, Mannarino and Carl Denninger. Carl Denninger said it's a mathematical certainty. It is going to crash. And the next crash is going to make the last crash look like a walk in the park. A picnic with a beautiful checkered tablecloth. The next one coming is bad because not just banks are going to be insolvent. Countries are going to be insolvent. Currencies are going to disappear. A Missouri doctor says the CDC is lying or grossly incompetent when they're talking about handling the Ebola threat. A guy by the name of Dr. Gil Mobley is a microbiologist. He's a medical doctor, microbiologist, and also a trauma doctor. Boarded an airplane in Atlanta, suited up with a complete hazmat suit with gloves, mask, goggles, hat, boots, the whole deal, suited up to get on a plane in Atlanta, and on the back of his hazmat suit it said, CDC is lying. Dr. Mobley says that they're sugarcoating the threat. We went from, oh, the threat of somebody coming to the United States is very small. That's not, well, we don't really have a worry in the world. Well, what happened in Dallas? A man from Liberia flew through Europe into Dallas, Texas. 80 to 100 people got in contact with this guy, and, oh, well, I guess they have a threat. And according to this medical Dr. Gil Mobley, the CDC is lying or is incompetent about the threat of Ebola here in the U.S. Gregory Mannarino is also a physician's assistant. He says, hey, listen, make sure you wash your hands, stay out of crowds, stay clear of people who are sneezing, just be very cleanly and stay away from people if you think that they're sick or they have a fever or they're sneezing or whatever. Stay away from any exchange of bodily fluids. That's what he says, and I think that's probably very good advice. Finally, something I just want to bring up here. This is the USA Today, and this is where I criticize the newspaper. And the reason why I'm criticizing is that you see this headline up here. Here's a headline that says Microsoft has a new Windows. This is Windows 10. There's no 9. There's 7 and 8 together. Hey, Icon. He has head spinning about the spinoff of PayPal and eBay. You think that's a bigger story than this one right here? This one right here. Read this. Goldman Sachs tapes exposes Fed's weakness. And now we're talking about the tapes by Carmen Segarra, who worked at the Fed, who's suing the Fed and said, hey, I tried to do my job as a regulator, and they fired me. The Fed says, oh, no. Bad job performance for Carmen Segarra, who is in there. This is a story about how she taped these so-called regulators at the Federal Reserve at Goldman Sachs that are embedded at Goldman Sachs, and it taped them basically giving Goldman Sachs a pass on some shaky things that they were doing. And, I had one of my readers, Colin, say, it's, I don't know if you've seen this or not, and I have. And he says, the whole idea of the Federal Reserve regulating banks like Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan, which are part of the Federal Reserve System, and they own the Fed, J.P. Morgan, banks like J.P. Morgan and Goldman. Of course, it's a secret who's in the Fed with banks, but I'm sure they are. And he says it's a conflict of interest of the highest order. The Federal Reserve is regulating itself, in effect, because the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's a consortium of private banks. And it's a huge conflict of interest for the Federal Reserve to be regulating the banks that own the Fed. But the tapes basically lay out in very clear audio and very clear words from the so-called regulators that the Federal Reserve doesn't do much regulation of these banks. And these are the banks that caused the financial meltdown. Back to the newspaper and where they put this story. Here, they put this story down here at the bottom. And you think it's just a little one-off story, and you open it up. And it's a huge story in here throughout the whole page. There's Carmen Segarra right there. Here's Carmen Segarra, the person that's a whistleblower that basically brought this all to light. But basically, a lot of people have thought that the Federal Reserve doesn't do much regulating of its banks, i.e. Tim Geithner, who works at the New York Fed before and during the run-up to the financial disaster. He didn't regulate the banks, and whoops, nobody saw that coming, and here we have the TARP and, tens of trillions of dollars in bailout, and on this side of the water and over in Europe, and complete disaster, and the Fed, nobody saw that coming. We didn't see the subprime crisis, the liar loans, the packaging of securities that were not AAA. They were rated AAA, and then they're later turned toxic. Now they're legacy assets. And, this story by the USA Today, they bury it on the bottom of the paper. This ought to be above the fold of the newspaper. It ought to be up here because, especially in lieu of the fact that we're headed towards another financial calamity, and the financial calamity is going to be because of the big Wall Street banks have leveraged up and did crazy, reckless things, and they'll be asking for taxpayers and governments to bail them out once again. But, of course, Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and banks like that, having a relationship with Gannett, a company I used to work for, that probably had no effect on their reporting whatsoever. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments and your donations. I really appreciate that. Go out and have a nice weekend, and fear not.